It's funny how life can turn on a dime. One day you're cruising along thinking everything is fine, and the next you're staring into the abyss of betrayal. My name is Jake, and I'm here to tell you about the night my whole world crumbled and how I turned the tables on the woman I once loved. Let me set the stage. I've been married to Kelly for 6 years, and for the most part it wasn't perfect, but it was good. I mean, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but we managed. We shared a nice house, had a few mutual friends, and were looking forward to starting a family. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. I noticed little things at first, Kelly being more secretive with her phone, spending extra hours at work, and the occasional late-night meetings. At first, I brushed it off as her just being dedicated. After all, she was a lawyer, and I admired her ambition. But then, she started coming home later than usual, and sometimes wearing clothes that looked like they came straight out of a fashion magazine. I remember one time I jokingly asked if she was having an affair with a runway model. She just laughed it off, but there was something in her eyes that made my gut twist. Then came the night I found out the truth. I had a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach after another late work night for her. She said she was out with clients, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to follow her. Yes, I know it sounds dramatic, but I had to know. When my gut tells me something, I usually listen. I drove to the swanky bar downtown where she said she had a meeting and parked a few blocks away. I watched as she entered, looking stunning, and my heart sank. I waited. After what felt like hours, I saw him, my lawyer, Eric, walking into the bar behind her. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They were laughing, and the way they leaned into each other made my blood boil. I couldn't believe it. My wife, my partner, was cheating on me with the very man I trusted to handle our legal affairs. I felt like a fool. I could almost hear the pieces of my life shattering inside my head. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I took a couple of photos with my phone just to have proof. When I got home, I was a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion. But mostly I felt heartbroken. All the love I had for her felt twisted and tainted. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, replaying the scene in my mind like a broken record. It was like I was living in some twisted version of a soap opera where I was both the producer and the star. The next day I confronted her. I had to. I wanted to hear the words come out of her mouth. I was filled with rage as I laid out the evidence, showing her the photos I had taken. The look on her face was a mix of shock and disdain. She didn't even try to deny it at first. Instead, she launched into this elaborate excuse about how I had pushed her away and how she was just filling a void. I couldn't believe my ears. The nerve of her. She claimed that Eric had been there for her during stressful times, offering her emotional support. The whole time I stood there, my heart racing, I felt this cold, hard lump in my chest. How could she justify this? I demanded answers, but all I got were more lies and dismissals. It was infuriating, and I knew I couldn't be with someone who betrayed my trust so easily. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, and I had no idea how to swim back to shore. In that moment of confrontation, I decided right then and there that I wouldn't just roll over and take this. I was going to take control of the situation. I wasn't going to be the victim in this twisted plot. I felt a surge of determination. I'd hire the best lawyer I could find, someone to not only represent me but to destroy her in court. I wanted her to feel what I felt, and so began my plan for revenge. Little did Kelly know, I was about to turn the tables on her in the most devastating way possible. I would make sure that she regretted every single decision she had made. From that moment, I knew I was prepared to fight back. The stage was set for a legal battle that would shake the foundations of our lives. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt strangely empowered. I was ready to take back control of my life. I would not let this betrayal define me. It was time to put my plan into action. After the confrontation with Kelly, the first thing I did was start looking for a lawyer. Given my recent discovery, I knew I needed someone who could not only represent me but also understand my anger and sense of betrayal. I was determined to win this fight and come out on top. As fate would have it, I had a friend named Dave whose brother, Mark, was known as one of the best family law attorneys in the city. Mark was a bulldog in the courtroom, renowned for his aggressive tactics and unyielding approach. I called Dave and asked for an introduction, and to my surprise, he offered to set up a meeting that very week. I knew this was the first step towards regaining my sense of control and dignity. I wasn't going to let Kelly walk away unscathed. A few days later, I met Mark at a coffee shop near his office. He was everything I hoped for: confident, sharp, and direct. I laid out my story, the betrayal, the affair, and my overwhelming feelings of anger and hurt. Mark listened intently, nodding as I recounted the details of Kelly's infidelity, the lies she spewed, and the way she casually justified her actions. "This isn't just a divorce, Jake. This is personal," he said, leaning in with a glint in his eye. "We're going to take this to court, and I'll ensure that she feels the repercussions of her actions. We'll make sure she understands the severity of what she's done and how it impacts your future." I felt a surge of relief wash over me. For the first time since discovering Kelly's betrayal, I felt hopeful. Mark's fierce determination mirrored my own. I left that meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. I had a plan, and I wasn't just going to sit back and let her ruin my life with her choices. That weekend, I began gathering evidence to support my case. I scoured through our shared accounts, combing through messages and receipts that could paint a picture of her betrayal. I dug deep, looking for anything that could give me the upper hand in court. I had to be meticulous. Every detail mattered. I even decided to hire a private investigator to gather more evidence on her affair. The investigator was thorough, capturing footage of Kelly meeting Eric at various spots around town. It was like I was living in some twisted detective novel. The more I learned, the angrier I became. Each piece of evidence I collected was like a dagger to my heart, but it also fueled my resolve. I was on a mission. As I worked through the process, I started feeling a range of emotions. Anger mixed with a sense of empowerment, but also a deep sadness. I had shared so much with Kelly, a life, dreams, and plans for the future. I had loved her deeply, and it pained me to see it all crumble, but I pushed those feelings aside. I focused on the goal, to ensure she would pay for the pain she had caused me. I didn't want to just win. I wanted to destroy any illusion she had about getting away with her actions. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, and I found myself reveling in the idea of taking her down a peg. The day of our first court appearance arrived faster than I expected. I was both anxious and eager. Walking into that courtroom felt like stepping onto a battlefield. I wore a crisp suit, my heart pounding as I took my seat. Mark sat beside me, reviewing our strategy one last time. "Stay calm. Let me do the talking unless I ask for your input. Keep your emotions in check," he advised. I nodded, determined to hold it together. When Kelly walked in, my heart sank. She was dressed to impress, every bit the confident lawyer I once admired. But now I viewed her through a different lens, one filled with betrayal and anger. She glanced at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of guilt flash across her face, but it quickly vanished. The court proceedings began, and Mark wasted no time. He laid out my case with precision, highlighting the evidence we had gathered. He painted a vivid picture of our life together, juxtaposing it against her betrayal. It was as if he was squeezing the life out of her defense. Kelly's lawyer was an experienced woman, but she seemed taken aback by Mark's approach. I watched as she struggled to counter our claims. When it was Kelly's turn to testify, I held my breath. She launched into her version of events, spinning a narrative where I was the villain, the one who had pushed her away. I could feel my blood boil as she described our marriage as stifling and oppressive. "You see, I had no choice," she insisted, looking at the judge with feigned sincerity. "I needed to feel alive again. Eric was there for me in ways my husband never was. But Mark was ready. He pulled out the evidence, the photos from the private investigator, showing Kelly meeting Eric at various places during the time she claimed to be working late. The moment the judge saw the images, I felt a wave of triumph wash over me. Kelly's facade was crumbling right before my eyes, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I knew this was just the beginning of our battle, but with every piece of evidence, I felt more in control. I was ready to fight for my future and reclaim my life. The emotional turmoil was still there, but I was focused now, driven by the desire for justice. This was far from over, and I was more than prepared for what lay ahead. With each passing day, I was reminded that the fight would be long and exhausting, but I was determined to see it through. I would not just survive this betrayal, I would rise from these ashes stronger than ever. And Kelly, she'd soon learn that actions have consequences, and I was more than willing to ensure she faced them. The court proceedings dragged on, and each session felt like a lifetime. It was emotionally draining, and I found myself fluctuating between anger and sadness. I was standing in a storm of emotions, and sometimes it felt unbearable. As Mark and I prepared for each subsequent hearing, I realized I needed to steel myself for the battle that lay ahead. Kelly was relentless, even in the courtroom. She was determined to paint herself as the victim, and she had a knack for playing the emotional card. I'd watch her tear up while recalling how lonely she felt in our marriage, as if her affair was some form of self-preservation. Every tear she shed felt like salt in the wound, and I had to remind myself that this was all part of her strategy. Mark, however, was unfazed. He had a way of dissecting her claims and turning them against her. He presented our shared life, the good memories and the plans we had made, contrasting them with her deceitful choices. Each time he laid down evidence, I felt a rush of hope. I knew that eventually the truth would shine through. One afternoon, we had a hearing scheduled that revolved around the division of assets, and I braced myself for what was to come. Kelly was adamant about fighting for half of everything we'd built together. It was infuriating. It was one thing to cheat and lie, but to sit there and try to take what I had worked hard for, that was crossing a line. Mark and I spent the days leading up to it strategizing about how to present our case. I had documents ready, bank statements, receipts, everything. We were about to go up against her attempts to claim what wasn't hers. It felt like preparing for battle, and I couldn't shake off the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was time to take a stand. When we entered the courtroom that day, I could feel the tension in the air. Kelly was already there, looking composed yet fierce. My heart raced as I took my seat next to Mark. He began the proceedings with a summary of our marital assets and how they should be divided, emphasizing that these were not just numbers but years of hard work and sacrifice. As the hearing progressed, Mark made a compelling argument. He highlighted the fact that Kelly's affair had not only broken the trust in our marriage but also jeopardized our financial stability. Her decision to cheat with my lawyer had implications beyond just betrayal. It affected our future. I could see the judge listening intently, and I felt a flicker of hope. But then Kelly took the stand again. This time, her demeanor shifted. Rather than playing the victim, she became aggressive, trying to deflect attention from her actions. "Jake is just trying to punish me because I wanted to find happiness," she proclaimed, her voice rising. "He's using this court as a weapon instead of focusing on what's best for both of us." I stared at her, incredulous. So now I was the bad guy for wanting to protect what was mine after she had decimated our marriage. It was maddening, but I held my composure, reminding myself that this was part of her game. Mark jumped in. "You claim you want happiness, Kelly, but at what cost? You cheated on your husband and are now trying to take what he has worked for. Is this the example of happiness you want to set?" The courtroom fell silent. I could see Kelly's facade crack as the reality of her actions sank in. Her bravado faltered, and for the first time she looked vulnerable. It was a small victory, but I cherished it. After what felt like hours of back and forth, the judge finally called for a recess. As we stepped out of the courtroom, Mark turned to me, his expression serious. "You're doing great, Jake. Just keep your head in the game. We're close to turning this in our favor." His words gave me hope, but I still had lingering doubts swirling in my mind. As the days turned into weeks, I found a new rhythm in this fight. I began attending support groups for men going through similar situations. Listening to their stories reminded me I wasn't alone. The camaraderie helped ease the pain I carried, even if just a little. Some of the guys had gone through even worse betrayals, and their resilience was inspiring. It became clear that survival was possible, even after heartbreak. However, I still had moments when I would sit alone in my apartment, staring at the walls that had once echoed with laughter and love. The memories of happier times with Kelly haunted me. I would close my eyes and remember our wedding day, the way she looked in her dress, how we danced together like we were the only two people in the world. It felt surreal to think how quickly everything had changed. In those quiet moments, the anger would bubble up, but so would determination. I kept reminding myself of the plan I had set in motion. Kelly had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. I was not just fighting for myself. I was also fighting for the life I envisioned and for the respect I refused to lose. As Mark and I prepared for the next court date, I felt a sense of resolve settling in. I knew what I wanted to achieve. It wasn't just about winning in court or getting the upper hand. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring that Kelly understood the impact of her choices. When the next hearing arrived, I was ready. I walked into that courtroom with a sense of purpose. I could feel the tension in the air, but this time it fueled me. It was time to put everything I had learned into action and show Kelly that I wouldn't be broken by her betrayal. The proceedings began, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I was ready to stand my ground and fight for my future. I would show her that I was not just a victim. I was a man ready to take control of his life again, no matter what it took. As the next hearing commenced, I could feel the energy in the courtroom crackling like static electricity. I sat beside Mark, who was flipping through our documents, preparing for the onslaught of arguments that would soon unfold. Kelly entered the room, her posture rigid, and for a brief moment I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. There was anger, yes, but also a deep sense of sadness that this was how our story had spiraled into chaos. As the judge took his seat, I focused on the task at hand. Mark had prepped me thoroughly, reminding me to stay calm, stick to the facts, and not let Kelly's theatrics sway me. I was determined to keep my cool, even if she tried to push my buttons. Mark started with a clear, concise review of our financial situation, presenting evidence of our shared assets and the contributions we both made to our marriage. He detailed how our home, our savings, and our investments were a joint effort, and how Kelly's betrayal had jeopardized that foundation. I could see the judge nodding, keeping his eyes on the proceedings, clearly engaged. Then came Kelly's turn. She was ready, but this time there was an edge to her performance. She claimed she felt trapped in our marriage and painted a picture of me as a controlling husband who didn't appreciate her or support her ambitions. It was infuriating. Her words dripped with manipulation as she tried to turn the narrative against me. Jake never valued my career, she said, her voice rising. He always wanted me to be the perfect housewife, and when I didn't fit that mold, he lost interest and became resentful. I had to look elsewhere for validation. I gritted my teeth. This was pure gaslighting. I had always encouraged her to pursue her career. It was one of the reasons I fell in love with her in the first place. Mark, however, was ready to counter her claims. He asked her direct questions about her affair, how she could justify cheating when she had a husband who supported her aspirations. Are you saying that an affair is justified because you feel unappreciated? Mark probed, his voice steady. Does that not make you a willing participant in this tragedy rather than a victim? You chose to betray your marriage. Kelly faltered. She stammered through her response, and I could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed defense. Each time she struggled, I felt the weight of vindication. It was empowering to see her unravel in front of the judge, the truth finally surfacing. Like a ship rising from the depths, the hearing progressed and Mark continued to press her on her choices. He brought up the evidence we had collected, including the photos and messages that exposed the affair. Each revelation was like a hammer striking a nail, solidifying my case. I watched as Kelly's confidence waned, her composure slipping with every piece of evidence Mark presented. It was hard to watch her squirm, but a part of me felt a strange satisfaction. This was the reckoning she had brought upon herself. I had poured my heart into our marriage, only for her to take it and throw it away. Now she was facing the consequences of her actions, and I was standing tall, unyielding. Later in the proceedings, it was time for me to take the stand. The moment felt surreal as I faced the judge in the courtroom full of strangers. I took a deep breath and began recounting my side of the story, detailing the love and trust I had placed in Kelly, only to have it shattered. I expressed how her affair had not just broken our bond, but had left me questioning everything about myself. I was surprised by how composed I felt. Sharing my truth was empowering, and I could see the judge listening intently. I emphasized the emotional and financial toll her betrayal had taken, illustrating how I had devoted myself to our marriage and had made sacrifices for her career. I wanted the court to see the real impact of her actions. When I finished, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had spoken my truth, and I hoped it resonated with the judge. Mark took the opportunity to ask me a few questions, guiding me to reinforce my points. "Jake, how did you feel when you discovered the affair?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar sting of heartbreak wash over me. Devastated, I replied, my voice steady. "I felt like I had lost everything. The woman I loved, the plans we made, the future I envisioned, it all vanished in an instant. I didn't just lose a partner, I lost my best friend." As the session continued, I could see Kelly's demeanor shift. The confident facade she put up began to crumble as she realized I was not backing down. There was a fire in me now, a relentless determination to expose the truth. At the end of the hearing, I could see the judge contemplating the evidence presented. As we filed out, Mark turned to me and smiled. "You did great, Jake. The judge is considering everything, and I think we're making real progress." I felt a flicker of hope spark within me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed I could emerge from this fight not just a survivor but victorious. The road ahead was long, but I was ready to continue the battle. However, as we left the courtroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that this fight was far from over. Kelly would not go down without a struggle, and I braced myself for whatever she would throw at us next. The next chapter of this saga was unfolding, and I was prepared to face it head-on. No more hiding, no more running from the truth. I was ready for the war that lay ahead, and I wouldn't rest until I came out on the other side, stronger than before. As I drove home, thoughts raced through my mind. My future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: I was committed to reclaiming my life, no matter the obstacles. This journey would not define me. Instead, it would be the catalyst for my transformation. I felt empowered and ready to take the reins. The next phase of this battle was upon us, and I wouldn't shy away from the fight. As the next court date approached, I could feel the tension mounting in my chest. Each passing day brought a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I knew Kelly wouldn't take her impending defeat lying down. After watching her unravel in the courtroom, I expected her to come back with a vengeance. My resolve was strong, but I was prepared for her to pull out every trick in the book. In the days leading up to the hearing, I spent late nights with Mark, strategizing and preparing for what we anticipated would be a hard-fought battle. He had gathered additional evidence, including witness statements from friends and colleagues who had seen Kelly and Eric together. Each piece of testimony painted a clearer picture of her disloyalty, and I felt a sense of growing confidence. Mark and I analyzed every detail, ensuring we were ready for any curveballs Kelly might throw our way. I remembered the sting of betrayal and was driven by a fierce determination to ensure my voice was heard. I would not allow her to manipulate the narrative any longer. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. I walked into the courtroom feeling a mix of nerves and adrenaline. The air buzzed with tension, and I could sense the stakes were higher than ever. Kelly was already there, her face a mask of determination. I could see the fire in her eyes, and I steeled myself for what was to come. The judge entered, and we all rose in unison. As the proceedings began, I could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. Mark started with a strong opening statement, reiterating the facts of the case and emphasizing the emotional and financial impact of Kelly's affair. He laid out our evidence clearly, detailing how her choices affected not just our marriage, but my entire life. When it was time for Kelly to take the stand, I watched closely. She was clearly rattled from the last hearing, but she still attempted to maintain her composure. This time, however, Mark was ready. He asked her probing questions, forcing her to confront the reality of her actions. "Kelly," he began, "were you aware of the impact your affair would have on your husband? Did you consider how your decisions would affect his life?" Her response was a mix of indignation and deflection. "I didn't think that way. I was just trying to find a way to feel good about myself again. I didn't mean for it to hurt anyone," she shot back, her voice full of defensiveness. Mark pressed on. "Did you think about the vows you made? The commitment you made to Jake? How can you justify your actions?" I sat silently, watching her squirm under the pressure. Mark's relentless questioning stripped away her layers of excuses and revealed the truth beneath. It was brutal to witness, but I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that I wasn't the only one who could see her for who she truly was. But then, in a surprising turn, Kelly produced a document from her lawyer's briefcase. "I have evidence too," she stated, her voice shaky but defiant. She presented a series of emails from my old college roommate who had contacted her after our separation began. The emails were ambiguous at best, suggesting I had been unfaithful during our marriage. The courtroom gasped. I felt my heart drop. What was she trying to do? I was taken aback. Everything she had accused me of felt like a cheap shot, a desperate move to turn the tables and paint me as the villain. I had never cheated on Kelly. The thought made me sick. Mark quickly jumped in, refuting her claims. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Those emails are out of context. There's no evidence of infidelity on Jake's part, and this is simply a diversionary tactic to shift blame." I could see the judge's expression harden as he listened. It was evident this wasn't going to work in her favor, but I couldn't shake the unease. It was a reminder that Kelly was still capable of deceiving and manipulating, even in the throes of her own downfall. As the hearing continued, I was determined not to let her attempts derail me. I kept reminding myself of the clarity I had gained throughout this process. This was about standing up for myself, about reclaiming my life and my dignity. I wouldn't allow Kelly to twist the narrative any longer. After hours of testimony, Mark concluded with a powerful closing argument. He summarized the emotional and financial toll of Kelly's betrayal and insisted that I deserved to move forward without the burden of her actions. He painted a picture of a man who had been wronged, emphasizing my integrity and commitment to our marriage. The judge listened carefully, his expression unreadable. I felt a sense of calm wash over me, knowing that I had presented my truth. I had fought hard, not just for my assets, but for my own sense of worth and respect. As the hearing came to a close, the judge announced a brief recess, giving us all a moment to collect our thoughts. I stepped outside the courtroom, needing air. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to steady my racing heart. The emotional weight of the last few hours settled heavily on my shoulders. Mark joined me, his expression serious. "You did well, Jake. The judge is taking all of this into consideration. We may have a favorable outcome." I nodded, hoping he was right. I watched as Kelly emerged from the courtroom, her face a mix of anger and frustration. She shot me a glare that sent a chill down my spine, but I held my ground. I was not afraid. As we waited for the judge to return, I reflected on everything that had led me to this point. It was a journey filled with pain, but it was also one of self-discovery. I had learned more about myself than I ever thought possible. I had found my voice, and I was no longer the passive husband who allowed betrayal to define him. When the judge returned, the atmosphere shifted. The tension was palpable as everyone settled back into their seats. I could feel my heart pounding as the judge prepared to deliver his decision. This was it, the moment that would determine the course of my life moving forward. After careful consideration of the evidence presented and the testimonies given, the judge began. "I have reached a decision regarding the division of assets and the implications of infidelity on this marriage." I held my breath, knowing that everything hinged on this moment. I was ready for whatever came next, determined to face the outcome with dignity. Whatever the verdict, I knew I had fought what was right. The journey was far from over, but I felt a newfound strength coursing through me. I was ready for the next chapter of my life, no matter what it held. As the judge spoke, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. Each word he uttered felt like the ticking of a clock, counting down to either liberation or further despair. "In light of the evidence presented," he continued, "and the circumstances surrounding the affair, I have determined that the division of assets will favor Jake." A rush of relief washed over me, and I almost couldn't believe what I had just heard. It felt surreal, as if I was floating outside my body, watching everything unfold. The judge went on to outline the specifics of the division, emphasizing that while our marriage had once been a partnership, the breach of trust by Kelly had serious consequences. I glanced at Kelly, and for the first time, I didn't see a woman who had betrayed me. I saw someone facing the repercussions of her actions. Her face twisted in anger and disbelief as the reality of the judge's decision sank in. I felt a mixture of pity and satisfaction. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. The judge concluded, "Given the emotional distress caused by the affair, I also recommend counseling for both parties to navigate this difficult transition." I nodded, knowing that I had a long journey ahead of me, but I was ready to face it head-on. As the gavel came down and the court session ended, I rose from my seat, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. Mark patted me on the back, his expression proud. "You did it, Jake. You stood your ground and it paid off." Walking out of the courtroom, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I felt lighter than I had in months. The struggle had been arduous, but I had faced my demons and emerged stronger. After the hearing, Kelly approached me in the hallway, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I looked her directly in the eyes, no longer the man who felt lost and broken. "No, Kelly, this is the beginning for me. I'm moving on and I'm going to be just fine." Her gaze faltered, and I could see the reality of her situation settling in. As I walked away, I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I was finally reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. The emotional scars of the past would take time to heal, but I knew I was on the right path. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I focused on my job, investing time in hobbies I had neglected during my marriage. I rediscovered my passion for painting, which had always been a form of therapy for me. I found solace in colors and brushstrokes, expressing the tumultuous emotions I had bottled up for so long. I also sought support from friends and family. Their encouragement helped me regain my confidence and reminded me of the love and support that surrounded me. I began dating casually, exploring connections with new people. It was liberating to feel desired again, to know that I could share my life with someone who valued me. Through it all, I worked on forgiveness, not for Kelly's sake, but for my own. I realized that holding onto anger would only weigh me down. I wanted to move forward unburdened, free from the chains of resentment. Gradually, I started to see the silver lining in what had happened. It was painful to acknowledge, but I learned so much about myself. The strength I didn't know I had, the importance of self-respect, and the value of open communication in a relationship. I vowed never to let anyone take advantage of my trust again. As I stood in front of my easel one evening, painting a sunset that mirrored the hope I felt within, I reflected on everything I had been through. I realized that the journey was not just about overcoming betrayal. It was about rediscovering who I was and reclaiming my happiness. Looking back, I think the hardest lesson was that love doesn't always guarantee loyalty, but self-love is a choice I now embrace every day. I am stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever life throws my way. If there's one piece of advice I can offer to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, it's this: do not let someone else's actions define your worth. You have the power to take control of your own story, to rewrite the narrative in a way that uplifts you. Embrace your pain, learn from it, and use it as a catalyst for growth. You are deserving of love and respect, and never forget that. As I put my brush down and stepped back to admire my latest creation, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The struggle had been worth it. I had emerged from the chaos a better man, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life.